everyone that made time tonight. My name is Mirthe. I am working with BarCore for their Precision Health department. And I have Emily with us today as well. She's the head teacher. You might see her up there as well. So we'll be talking about the top 5 strategies you can do from a dietary and lifestyle perspective to support your perimenopause and finally feel better, but also how to optimize if you don't have symptoms yet so that it becomes a smooth transition when it does happen. Okay, so we will be touching upon the most common symptoms, but also why they matter and their underlying triggers a little bit today. The most important part today will be the things you can do straight away in your diet, in your lifestyle to have an easier transition from a functional medicine perspective. So we won't go a lot into the underlying triggers today. We can touch upon that in a different time. I will just briefly mention those. And then we will be talking about what you can do to take your health to the next level if you choose to, things like how you can test, how you can add certain supplements if that's what you want to be doing. So first of all, menopause, there's a lot of confusion about that term for people. Menopause is actually the time when your menstrual cycles have already stopped. In particular, if you've gone 12 months without a cycle, without a period, that's what is called menopause in medical terms. But the time when people often complain about is called perimenopause. That's what we'll be focusing on today. We'll be talking about that time that is often very hormonally charged and can cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. And it can start as early as in the late 30s. It can go all throughout the 40s, and it can go on to the 50s. It can even sometimes take a decade after menopause has already started for these symptoms to stay there. Some people only have the symptoms for a couple of years. Some people don't have symptoms at all. So, for example, they did studies in Japan and in other Asian countries where some of the women don't say they don't have any symptoms, any of what we think is normal and people are dreading, the perimenopausal symptoms like hot flashes, insomnia, irritability, they don't seem to have them. So there must be something that is triggering them for us in the Western culture that isn't the case over there. But first of all, what are these common symptoms that women often have in their perimenopausal time? One is hot flashes, insomnia, also waking up at night with hot flashes, irritability, weight gain, especially around the midline. A lot of women that I see say, I'm not doing anything different, and all of a sudden I'm just having this layer of fat around my belly. I don't know what to do with it. I've heard that this abdominal fat is not a good thing for my health, but I just don't know how to get rid of it. We'll be talking about that in a moment. Also, a lot of women, especially also all of you that are joining today, a lot of you have replied to my little questions, what your symptoms are or what you're worried about. Memory problems, all of a sudden you just might not be able to remember things. You might be missing words, which can be slightly annoying as well. Also common are erratic cycles and very heavy cycles. So you might have been very regular all of your menstrual years, but then all of a sudden they're getting very heavy, they're getting longer or shorter, and you just don't know what to do with it. And another very common symptom is a drop in libido, and that your vagina, it's called vaginal atrophy, but it's actually when your vagina gets dry, and then you, as a result, might not even feel like having sex anymore either. We'll be talking about all of these in a moment. But why do they matter? Why they're just all symptoms. You might be thinking, okay, well, I just have to deal with them and then there's no big deal. Unfortunately, research has shown that women that have more pronounced symptoms, especially hot flashes, also called vasomotor symptoms, actually have an increased risk of later on developing cardiovascular problems, bone density, and frailty. So it's not just a problem in your 40s and in your 50s that you're just kind of having to deal with, but having these symptoms can be a biomarker for more problems down the line. So we really want to address them when they're happening so that you have a longer, healthy lifespan after all. Also, obviously, a big deal is quality of life. It's not just about that you're having hot flashes and you have lack of sleep and libido. That might be affecting it might affect all your relations and your day-to-day quality of life. So all of these things are quite important to address and prevent if you don't have them yet. So what we'll be talking about today mostly is how you can prevent them as early as in your 30s, because I know some of you attending today are in your 30s or in your 40s when you don't have symptoms yet, because what we'll be talking about in a moment is what functional medicine is. So functional medicine actually looks at the body as a system that has all these underlying cogwheels that have to work in harmony to produce health. It's not just one thing that goes off and then you have a symptom, you have a disease, but it's all these underlying factors that have to work in harmony. And if they don't work well, then you have all of these outside symptoms and diseases. So rather than just addressing one thing, one symptoms within functional medicine, we try to prevent and support all these underlying cogwheels so that down the line, you are having no problems or the least possible problems in all the different systems of your health span. Just a quick medical disclaimer, functional medicine is a complementary approach. So still go to your GP if you have any symptoms. Don't use this as a diagnosis or as a this prescription today. You still have, if you have any symptoms, go and talk it through with your GP. Okay, now finally, let's dive into the real deal, the underlying triggers. So as we just said, in functional medicine, we look at this cogwheel underlying symptoms rather than saying, okay, you have hot flashes, let's try and mask it. You have memory loss, let's try and mask it. We look at what is actually triggering it. What are the underlying problems? And in medical research or in the medical community, if you go to your GP and tell them about these symptoms, they often say, well, it is your estrogen is just dropping away now. And all these symptoms are due to not enough estrogen. They might put you on a hormone replacement therapy, they might not, but they won't help you much else. Now, we won't talk much about hormone replacement therapy today, unless we're going to in the question and answers if you want to. But there are some potential downsides to hormone replacement therapy that have to be considered. So not everyone, and actually a lot of my patients don't really want to take hormones. So that would leave us with no real options for this time period. Luckily, research now shows that there's actually a lot of other factors that are underlying triggers to all these symptoms that we described before. And it is not just a drop in estrogen, which usually only happens when you are already in menopause. So once your ovaries have stopped making hormones, then usually your estrogen drops. The time period before where all these symptoms happen is often dominated by something called estrogen dominance, where your estrogen actually goes up higher. And so that causes a lot of problems. Another thing is something called progesterone deficiency, where your progesterone, another sex hormone, gets too low, and that causes a lot of the symptoms as well. So especially if estrogen goes high and progesterone goes too low, that causes this thing called estrogen dominance that a lot of you might have heard about. We need estrogen to produce growth in our body, to keep everything kind of nice, our vaginal wall, everything kind of nice and radiant and lubricated. It is important for our bone health, but if it goes too high, it can actually cause unopposed growth. So then often we get cysts, we get endometriosis, we get fibroids, all these things that people say, well, that's just happening. It's actually usually a sign of estrogen dominance and progesterone deficiency. So progesterone is a hormone that our body makes, especially in the second part of our cycle after ovulation. And oftentimes in perimenopause, we don't ovulate as regularly anymore because our ovaries are getting tired. And then we don't have enough progesterone in the second half. And that can then lead to a lot of the other symptoms like problems sleeping, anxiety, irritability, weight gain, because progesterone is actually one of our calming hormones. It helps us go to sleep. It helps us make this calming neurotransmitter called GABA. It helps our body make the right amount of ovarian lining of takes away endometriosis and cysts. So it's really quite important. And we'll talk about how we can fix all these things in a moment. Another common underlying trigger of the symptoms is low testosterone. So, for example, if your libido drops, if you feel like you're kind of really tired and you've just lost the zest in life, it is often due to lack of testosterone, and that can be addressed as well. Another thing that is commonly a common trigger and contributor towards these perimenopausal symptoms is a low thyroid. You might have heard of your thyroid. Common symptoms of a thyroid are being irritable, depressed, feeling sluggish, not being able to get out of bed, having depression and anxiety, losing hair. A lot of you have written down that you're having problems with hair loss, with memory. All these are actually symptoms of low thyroid. So oftentimes in that perimenopausal stage, it might not be that you're in perimenopause. It might just be that your thyroid has slowly over the years started kind of giving up and is now causing problems more so than your sex hormones. So that's also important to address if that's the case. Another really important one is your stress level and cortisol hormone. So a lot of you might know about how important stress is for overall health. But what they realized is that when you're having the wrong kind of cortisol throughout the day, meaning too little in the morning when your body should be giving you a good spike of cortisol to wake up and get motivated, and then later in the day when it should drop so you can go to sleep and be relaxed and calm. So oftentimes in perimenopause, they've seen that it does the opposite. It is too low in the morning, so you can't get out of bed, and then it stays too high later, so then you can't sleep and you feel wired. And that actually has been shown to also contribute to the things like hot flashes. So it doesn't have to be just your estrogen and your sex hormones that are going that are not working properly anymore, but it might just be that your cortisol is causing these problems and your stress levels. So all these things can be addressed, luckily. Another common underlying trigger for hot flashes and all the other symptoms is something called noradrenaline, which is kind of like the big brother of adrenaline, and it goes hand in hand with cortisol. It also gets pumped out if you're stressed, if you're wired, if you're running from one task to the next, if you're pretending to your body that you're running away from a tiger, but you're actually just running away from your husband or from your boss or from whatever else you want to do, and also perceived stress. So if you're ruminating, the body thinks that you are running away from a tiger and it pumps out cortisol and noradrenaline, and they have actually been shown to lead to hot flashes. So even if there's no problem with your other hormones, that might just be what is giving you hot flashes in that time, especially if your estrogen is not quite balanced anymore, then your body, your temperature gauge in the brain is just a little bit more sensitive. So all of a sudden, what before you were okay with, now the body doesn't quite know how to deal with it anymore. And another really important underlying trigger is your blood sugar balance and insulin resistance. And so a lot of you might know this, there's this abdominal fat that we accumulate often all of a sudden in our 40s, in our 50s, has a lot to do with insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone that the body pumps out when we're eating sugars, but also carbs. So a lot of people aren't aware that carbohydrates actually turn into sugar inside the body, even healthy ones like sweet potatoes and quinoa and chickpeas. They all do turn into sugar in the body. And if we're constantly having blood sugar swings throughout our life before our 20s, our 30s, then eventually our cells might not be able to respond to that well anymore, and we might be getting something called insulin resistance. Now, research shows that that is a big contributing factor to our, especially hot flashes, memory problems, irritability, because when your body, your cells aren't responding to insulin properly anymore, your body thinks it's not getting enough food, it's starving. And then every time you've eaten, it drops after the blood sugar, and then your body thinks, oh, I'm not getting enough, and it produces this fight or flight response that gives you a hot flash. Now, if you can train your body to be metabolically flexible and be able to burn ketones for fuel long before you get into perimenopause, then you usually have a more stable blood sugar and you don't have this issue so much. And we'll get into how we can do that in a little bit, in a little later. Another important underlying trigger is the gut and vaginal microbiome. So they found that especially the dry vagina or vaginal atrophy isn't just a problem with hormones, which is a lot harder to fix often, but they actually found that it is usually a problem with the vaginal microbiome, meaning that there aren't the right kind of bacteria in the gut, in the vagina, same as in the gut. A lot of us now know that we have gut bacteria that are really important for our health, but there's also a vaginal microbiome. And if you've had a history of recurrent yeast infections or thrush infections all throughout your 20s, your 30s, that might be a sign that your vaginal microbiome isn't quite balanced. You're not having the right kind of bacteria in there. You might be having some bad ones in there, some yeast infections in there that are overgrowing, and all of them have been shown to then contribute to systemic problems like your hormone deficiencies and hormone imbalances, but also directly linked to being more prone to vaginal dryness and atrophy. And another factor is that the body might have just accumulated some low-grade inflammation over time from lingering infections like candida, from the wrong kind of gut microbiome, from not eating the right amount of nutrients like omega-3s. The body needs that to quench inflammation, but also accumulated toxins like plastics and heavy metals. All of these can just slowly degrade the system over all these years prior to the 40s and 50s. And then when the ovaries start to play up and the hormones don't work as well anymore, then all of a sudden the body just doesn't know how to deal with it anymore. And then our liver can't deal with it properly anymore. That should be dealing with toxins, should be dealing with our hormones. And then that all just becomes a whole big mess that we can prevent and address, luckily. Nutrient deficiencies is also a thing, like I just said, for example, omega-3, really important, but we'll get into that in the next part, to what to eat to support all of that. And then lastly, once you're getting close to the actual menopause, when your period actually stops, your estrogen might drop, and with it, serotonin. So estrogen, most people are familiar with. It's one of our main sex hormones, but serotonin is our happy chemical in the brain, basically. It's also in other parts, it's in our gut, but in our brain, it is really important for us to feel happy and to feel calm and in peace. It also is really important to then at night make melatonin to help us sleep. And what research found is that estrogen is really tightly linked with serotonin. If there's not enough estrogen, our serotonin can't really work as efficiently and can't be produced as efficiently. So that goes hand in hand. So right at the end, we actually want to support our estrogen. In the beginning, it might be too high, so we want to try and get rid of it. And then in the end, we might want to support estrogen and support serotonin so that our system can work properly, especially also hot flashes, sleep, all these symptoms. Like I said, they're all tightly linked to these factors. Okay. Some of you might have been I did a lecture with Barcourt, I think in September last year, and we talked about the different body types, how they relate to hormones. You can go back through, we recorded it on YouTube, so you could go back through it. But this is just a little funny picture, because oftentimes your body shape can kind of tell you which hormones are off, whether it is mostly cortisol that is your problem, or estrogen, progesterone, your thyroid. But I won't go into detail here now on that, because otherwise it'll take way too long. Okay, so now we'll get to what you can actually do in your diet and lifestyle to support, prevent, and optimize that hormonally heavy time. I've put them into 5 basic pillars just to keep it very simple. And the earlier you start with it, the better. But even if you're already right through the menopause, right inside the perimenopause and having symptoms, or even if you're past it, because I know there's also a few of you joining today that have already gone past it, all of these factors will optimize not just your perimenopause, but also help you prevent long-term aging, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all these other factors that we want to not have, so we have a good quality in life and a good life health span. Okay, so the first part is what to eat. And as you might make sense from what I've just said, is that one of our main goals is to teach our body to have a stable blood sugar. So rather than having these highs and lows, which cause hot flashes and wake us up at night and make our abdominal, our belly store fat. All of that, we want to try and get it as stable as possible. So ideally, we want to go into a mostly low carb diet. I don't want you to go completely off carbs. We do need some carbs, but just don't eat carbs all day long, because a lot of people, all they do is start with porridge in the morning, then they have they have a sandwich for lunch, and then they have pasta for dinner, then they have some snacks in between that are chocolate bars, and then they have some rosé in the afternoon. That's all these different things are all sugars. So I don't want you to cut it out entirely. We need some carbs, but you want to try and just lower it so that your body can learn to switch into a fat burning state, also called ketosis. And it can only do that when your body isn't having blood sugar and isn't having insulin pumped out at the same time. So we want to just teach our body to be more metabolically flexible and go through periods of during the week and during the day where you don't have carbs for fuel. So ideally, you want to go to, let's say, 2 portions of carbs a day with your lunch, with your dinner, and then that will usually allow your body to, during over the night, in the morning, go into a fat burning state, and you can learn and teach the body to get ketones made in the liver. So when your blood sugar drops, the body can use the ketones, and then you don't get hot flashes, because these hot flashes only happen when the body thinks it's not getting any fuel because your blood sugar drops. Also, it will give you a better night's sleep and help you burn that belly fat and lots of other things. So as a general rule of thumb, ideally, you want to have a Mediterranean style diet. You've probably heard of this a lot, but there's a lot of research actually that has shown that a Mediterranean style diet that is mostly plant-based, so lots of different vegetables and a little bit of animal protein, and in particular omega-3s from fish, is what can help prevent and support perimenopausal symptoms. So they've done research into this. They've done research into the importance of all the different phytonutrients from the different colorful vegetables, and also a little bit of fruit. So they've done research that women that consume a little bit of fruit throughout life, not all the time, because then that's too much sugar again, but have a daily portion of an apple or a handful of berries or whatever else you like, they've shown that that helps people go through a smoother perimenopause transition, but also have a later menopause. So that doesn't only extend your fertility years, but also that means that the time after menopause, when your body doesn't have as many hormones to support your bones, to support your heart, is a little bit pushed back. So it's a good thing to try just get as many different nutrients in as you can. You want to have a little bit of cruciferous vegetables. They're broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, those kinds of things. They support your liver to get rid of all these plastics and heavy metals and excess estrogen, and just give your body a support to get rid of all these things, take it from your liver into the bile and out through your gut. So it's just a nice thing to daily give your body a detox support without having to go through crazy detox cleanses and cures and fad diets. Also, a little bit of soy if you like, especially once you hit menopause and your estrogen is actually low. Soy, if it's a good quality organic soy, can be supportive because it has estrogen mimicking effects. So once your estrogen drops, you might want to include that into your diet. Iodine, also really important to support your thyroid, to support your estrogen, to support all of your other hormones. And that's found in seaweed. A lot of you might not like to eat it, so you can also get it from a good quality multivitamin. But if you can, just add a little bit of seaweed here and there into your daily salad or big poke bowl. That's what I usually like. Is what I usually do and what I recommend to my patients, because that way you just kind of throw everything in, you get all the different nutrients, you don't have to think about it much. So, and we want to do that 5 or 6 days a week and really try and nourish ourselves. The next thing we really want to focus on getting in these 5 or 6 days a week are enough amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. Protein helps to support our muscle mass, so we don't lose that as we get older. It also helps to keep you satiated, so you're not starving. It also helps to burn fat and make you more insulin sensitive, but it is also a precursor for your hormones, especially your thyroid, but it is also important for serotonin production, for all your different happy chemicals in the brain. So that's really important. So roughly, rule of thumb, 1 to 2 portions of carbs per day. As a rule of thumb, 5 to 6 days a week. And you can sometimes do ketosis. We won't go into details there today unless you want to talk about it in detail later in the question answer. But if you are not menopausal yet, if you're still cycling, you don't want to do ketosis during your ovulation and in your second part of your cycle. So ketosis is a big trend right now. People go keto all the time, but they've actually done research that show that if you're going if you're being a ketogenic state nonstop during your ovulation and the second part of your cycle, you might actually cause more hormonal problems, drop your progesterone, increase your estrogen more, and have lots of issues. So you actually, if you want to experiment with ketosis, just do it in the first part of your cycle. And if you're having 1 or 2 portions of carbs per day, then you will still go into a keto state during the night while you're fasted, but you're not staying in it all day long. If you're postmenopausal, you could do it more often, 5 days a week, and then have 1 or 2 days of carb refill. Really important to have the carb refills. So we said 5, 6 days a week, do all of that. Then 1 or 2 days a week, I want you to do whatever you feel like, load up on carbs. We need a carb refill. And also just have cheats, have whatever you feel like so you don't feel so restricted and you're not falling off a wagon. And it's really important to also just enjoy, have some fun, do what pleases you basically. And we'll get to why that is important in the third or fourth step. But first up is the next one, when to eat and especially when not to eat. So another thing that people talk about now is intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting there's a lot of research now that shows that it is really important, has lots of great health benefits, especially because it helps to increase your insulin sensitivity. So what does that mean? If you're more insulin sensitive, your body won't store that abdominal fat, your body won't have these hot flashes, won't have the insomnia. And also your body, when you're in intermittent fasting, your body will produce some of these ketones so that you're more level-headed, everything's more balanced out, less inflamed. But as with the ketosis, I don't want you to go overboard with intermittent fasting. Have your meal latest at lunch, have 1 or 2 meals a day, but if you're having 1 meal only, make sure it's at lunch and not at dinner, because there's a lot of research now that shows that for women, it can completely mess with their cycles. So it's important to include something called circadian eating. You don't want to eat at night, you want to eat during the day, ideally mostly around midday. That's just the general rule of thumb. You can have 2 or 3 meals a day, but don't eat during the night. And then low carb. Also cyclical eating, like I just said, is in your monthly cycle. Make sure that during your ovulation and the second part of your cycle, don't experiment too much with long fasting with lots of ketosis because it could throw your hormones off. Okay, so the next one is one of the big pillars of how you can optimize the time of your life is to learn to, if you haven't done it so yet, how to manage your stress, how to rest, and how to include some more play. So I know that especially in London, people are quite highly strung. You want to make everything perfect, do things perfectly. Even this time of your life, you're probably thinking, okay, now I need to do this, this, this. But it's actually really important to also release some of that stress and just play a little. That's why, for example, with the diet, I think it's really important to have 1 or 2 days a week where you do things that you have a brownie, if that's what you feel like, or some ice cream, or you go out with some girlfriends or some friends and have a glass of wine, or do whatever you feel like. So you're reducing your stress. Because like I said in the beginning, stress is a huge factor in all of these perimenopausal symptoms, in your hormone problems, and just learning little simple self-care routines, like a few belly breaths, just breathing into your belly 3 or 5 times and slow it down will shift your body from the fight or flight, cortisol, noradrenaline system over to the rest and digest healing system. So you don't have to come up with fancy 30-minute meditation routines, but just a few little bit of learning how to breathe, how to slow down your breath, having some maybe a visualization practice that can help you set good goals so that you feel empowered in your life. All of that can be really simple, easy things to do to support your stress levels. Emily will also talk about barcore classes that can help with that in a moment. So I mentioned before that we have this, it's important that we have cortisol, that stress response, at the right time of the day. And I just want to hone into that a little bit more right now, because so in the morning, we want to have cortisol spikes so we have energy. And then we want it to drop off so that we can go to sleep at night. And melatonin, our sleep hormone, does the opposite. Now, if our cortisol stays up too high late in the day, our melatonin can't come up, and then we can't sleep. There's another reason why this is really important, but also an extra tool you can use in your toolbox to support your cortisol. It's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a little bit like melatonin in the way that it is reversed to cortisol. When your oxytocin goes up, your cortisol goes down. And oxytocin gets released when you're feeling connected. It gets released through physical touch. So that can be a hug, it can be a massage, it can be hanging out with your pet or a friend. But in particular, it gets released when you're breastfeeding or if you're having an orgasm. But you can also do all these other things if that's not available to you right now. But every time your oxytocin goes up, it pushes your cortisol down. So it's a really nice thing to try and include a little bit more play, connectedness with your friends, family, loved ones into your life. Okay, so next up is exercise. And I will let Emily talk about it. I'll just quickly say that as a general rule of thumb, you want to aim for high intensity classes that are no longer than 45 minutes with the high intensity portion, about 3 times a week. That will give you a really good support with your cortisol, with your insulin sensitivity. She will talk about the details in a moment. And then for the rest, you want to just have some gentle movement like walking and recovery classes. But let me just unmute and pin Emily.
I'm unmuted, Mirthe. Make it easy for you. Hi guys. I'll just be super quick on sort of some of the benefits of exercise. It can really support basically everything that Mirthe's been talking about already. And obviously I'll relate them back to the classes that we offer at Barcore, but exercise at the end of the day is exercise. If you have anything else that you prefer as well, all of this will still be really beneficial to you. So exercise in general, really great for obviously increasing your muscle strength, improving your insulin sensitivity, your cardiovascular health, and it can also really help to prepare you for a better night's sleep. So sort of all those things that Mirthe's literally just talked about, we can help start to improve on them as well. In terms of our sort of higher intensity classes, we've got our bar signature, bar form, bar advanced, bar sweat, all of them at 50 minutes long, but the actual high intensity part of that class is no longer than 45 minutes long because we've got the stretching in there as well. So sort of perfectly formed for hitting those target times. So just a little bit of sort of more information about everything. From the age of 30, you lose roughly 2 to 3% of muscle mass per year, which is known as sarcopenia, which sounds like quite a lot. And then once you start to hit menopause, the decline in hormones can actually accelerate that loss of muscle mass further. So by adding more exercise into your lifestyle, we can start to sort of counteract that and sort of either maintain muscle mass, your lean muscle mass, or actually start to improve it as well. So the loss of muscle mass can affect your power, your strength, your balance, your aerobic capacity, but you're then at a higher risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, joint pain, and injury, as well as an increased risk of osteoporosis once you've gone through menopause as well, due to that decline in estrogen. So exercise on a regular basis is going to help keep a lot of these at bay. One of the main things that we talk about in Barcore, but is relevant to any form of exercise, is the fact that it's weight bearing. So weight-bearing exercise, which is anything other than swimming and cycling, not to say that you shouldn't do those things, but if you want that weight-bearing, anything other than swimming and cycling is particularly good for the maintenance and improvement of bone density. So everyone, as they get older, is at risk of osteoporosis, so sort of weaker and less dense bones, but women in particular, as your estrogen levels decrease, can really affect this. So weight-bearing exercise actually triggers your osteoblasts, which help to create new bones. So we're all of a sudden getting these stronger bones, healthier bones. The other benefit to our sort of bar signature, form, advanced and sweat, and any other strength training, resistance training classes that you guys enjoy is that increase or maintenance of lean muscle. Now, building lean muscle can really help with the vasomotor symptoms, which are the symptoms due to that constriction and dilation of blood vessels, which can cause your hot flushes, your night sweats, heart palpitations, and changes in your blood pressure as well, as you're going through that perimenopause. There's been studies that actually show women experience on average a 50% reduction in hot flushes per day once they've started resistance training. So if you're sort of debating how many times you should start training, or if you're sort of averaging 1 or 2 classes a week, I would say just up it. Even 1 more class a week is going to really benefit you in helping that reduction of some of the more uncomfortable symptoms. The other class that we offer, which I think once you've experienced it is everyone's favorite, is our bar restore, which is an amazing class. And I've said to add it to your weekly routine, but I think both myself and Mirthe would just stress, add it every day if you can, as often as you want. There is no limits on this one. It's a class that focuses on allowing you to bring some calm to your mind and your body. We focus on breathing techniques. So as Mirthe said, a lot of diaphragmatic breathing and some different breathing patterns to help switch you into your parasympathetic nervous system, so that sort of calm and relaxed state. This can then in turn help to lower your cortisol levels, improve your breathing, and help to sort of balance out your hormones and reduce your stress. So due to the sort of fluctuating of your hormones, your cortisol levels can be increased. Your progesterone, as Mirthe said, is then declining through menopause, which is the hormone that has that calming effect on your body. So any activity that you guys can do to seek out some relaxation, some calm, is going to benefit you. Bar Restore is a really easy and accessible way of doing that, because we sort of do the work for you. You come in and we're going to help you be calm in that state. But anything else that you guys can do to encourage that relaxation is obviously going to be really beneficial. And then the last, and I think really obvious thing about exercise, is it's a mood booster. So it releases endorphins and your serotonin, and it has that really positive effect. So any movement that you can do is beneficial at this stage. Yeah, so that's just sort of how Barcore and any exercise can help you. Mirthe, I will switch back to you.
All right, I'm back on. Perfect, thank you, Emily. So one last little thing, and I think you mentioned it briefly, but so what you said is all the exercises are great because it helps your bones, it helps your insulin sensitivity, it helps your hormones, all of that. But one last thing that I just wanted to stress is that not more is not better in that sense. So we want to stick to these 45 minutes. Emily did say it, but I just want to make sure that you guys take that away. If we go longer than 45 minutes in our high intensity exercise, and if we don't have rest days in high intensity exercise, then our body actually gets more stressed out and it can do more harm than good. Especially in places like London, people like to over exercise. So as much as exercise is important, and like Emily said, the restorative classes every day, if you can, if you want to, perfect. If you go for let's say if you are doing a more hardcore Barcore class, those sweaty ones, the intense ones, then don't also go for a run later. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Don't go for another 2-hour run once you've already done a class. Give your body some rest. So you want to stick to 45 minutes, high intensity, a few times a week, and then just do more restorative things, gentle things. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next and last step that I would urge you to try and start doing tomorrow or today, tonight, ideally, is sleep. Sleep has gained a lot of interest over the last few years as well, because only when we sleep can the body really restore, reset, flush out toxins in the brain that have accumulated throughout the day. There's something called the lymphatic system. And only when we're asleep, in deep sleep, can that flush out these toxins and also these little plugs that we built that come up every day. And if we don't flush them out, they might start to accumulate over many years and then contribute to things like brain problems, mood problems, and also things like Alzheimer's down the line. So we want to really make sure that we give our body that rest so that our brain can function, our memory functions, and we stay fit and smart and sharp long term. Another important thing with sleep is that it is kind of like exercise. If we don't get enough sleep, our body the next day is a little bit inflamed, actually, and it becomes more insulin resistant. So even though you might be eating the same amount and the same type of food, after a night of bad sleep, your body responds to it completely differently. Your body will not be able to metabolize it properly and actually put it into your abdomen, into your belly for fat storage, because you are slightly insulin resistant the next day after a bad night's sleep. You also are more prone to eating more highly palatable foods, so things that taste really good but might not be very nutritious for you. So you have to be a lot stronger in your and willpower to stick to a healthy diet if you're not sleeping well. And also, like I said right in the beginning, you're more likely to be inflamed if you don't get that right sleep. Now, what is the circadian rhythm living that I'm mentioning here? It ties back into that cortisol curve that I said before and the melatonin curve. We have our body, all the different cells have this daily cycle, and they kind of respond to it. So first thing in the morning, our cortisol should be coming up, and it gets supported to do so if we are exposed to bright light. And then at night, we need to dim our lights and get off the screen. So hopefully everyone after this presentation is getting off their screens and has some more warm light around them so that our cortisol can drop. So if your sleep is having problems, you might just try some simple things like living with your circadian rhythm, the normal circadian rhythm. High intensity exercise in the morning, bright light in the morning, more calming, relaxing activities in the evening, no more stressful work at night if you can. Try and give your body this nice little curve to stick with it. Same with fasting. You want to eat around midday and not late at night, because all these things can tamper with your sleep, and then that causes havoc with all your hormones, your insulin sensitivity, all the things that we talked about. Okay, so importantly though, so these were the 5 big steps that you can start doing right away, and they're very simple. I think they're very basic. You probably all heard of them, but they are actually really important and have a really big impact. But one other takeaway message I want you to go away with today is that the 80-20 rule. So I don't want you to now start stressing about doing everything perfectly and then start to restrict, count calories, count your nutrients, and then start to binge eat. And it's another diet to fall off from. But think of it more, how can I best nourish myself? How can I include some play in my life, some time with friends? Because all these things are actually really important for our cortisol and all these other things that we mentioned. Okay. We won't go into some supplements today. We're already running over time. But so how can you support yourself with more precision? So now you know all these basics, but with Precision Health, how we do it with Barcore is that we actually, or I like to test people to then target your specific concerns. For example, you might be low or high in estrogen. You are not sure. Your testosterone might be high or low. Your blood sugar might be completely fine, but your stress might be off the charts. So I always think it's good to test so that we can then come up with a targeted plan for you that you can become the CEO of your health. So once you know what's not quite right, you can then make targeted choices to support prevent, and optimize. Another thing that we do within functional medicine and precision health is that even though you might have had an annual check from your doctor, they've given you your hormones and they say, oh, everything's fine, your cholesterol is fine, your blood sugar is fine, you might not be optimal. And all these things might already be contributing to that sludge inside your cells and contributing to symptoms. And then down the line in 20, 30 years, they might contribute to cardiovascular disease and brain problems and things like that. So within functional medicine, we actually look at your markers from a stricter range and say, well, this is not quite optimal. Let's try and optimize this with some simple dietary, lifestyle, and supplement choices. With, like I said here, diet and also some relaxation, things like that. But if you are confused about this, and if you enjoyed today, but aren't quite sure what you should be doing now, with Barco, we're thinking of putting a more in-depth workshop together in person, not on Zoom, so we can actually troubleshoot everything. We can each section, we can look into detail, we can come up with solutions if there's a problem with your sleep or with your exercise or with your diet or with certain hormones. We can look at all the different factors and try and find solutions for you in a in-person workshop in London. We're thinking about a Saturday afternoon with step-by-step guidance. So if any of you is interested in that, please shoot me an email, precisionhealth@barco.com, and we're thinking about doing it about mid-May. And also, so mid-May, because that way you could go and get your hormones tested before around day 21 of your cycle, but email me before so that you get it all organized, because then you can bring your hormone tests, and your blood sugar and all these different things, and we can actually talk them through in person and really come up with a good plan for you. So if anyone's interested, let us know so we can put it together. And then for the rest, if you want some more bespoke one-on-one support, there are packages with me at Barcor called Precision Health at Barcor, where you can book consultations with me one-on-one. So again, if you have questions for that, you can always just email me. So yeah, here's my email again, precisionhealth@barcor.com. You can find me on Instagram as well, where I put posts up on these different topics. I try and do it not too often, so I'm not spamming you, but enough so you get some nice information. Check that out if you like.